है रोशनी का कारवां.
This podcast is brought to you by Score Foundation.
ये है रोशनी, रोशनी, रोशनी का कारवां. रोशनी. Eyeway, ये है रोशनी का कारवां.
Hi, my name is George Abraham and welcome to Eyeway Conversations. My guest today is Dr. Urvi Jangam, who lives in Mumbai. And let's have a conversation with her and discover what she does. Welcome, Urvi.
Hello, George. Good morning.
Urvi, you are a doctorate, a PhD in German studies. That's unusual for a visually impaired or a blind Indian scholar.
My journey with the German language started whilst I was in college. I studied from Fergusson College in Pune during my junior college years. And that's where I started learning the language. It was a pretty fascinating start because it actually was a turning point where I wanted to learn a foreign language since my school days, and it was not possible. And, you know, it was an opportunity where I could try something new. And yeah, I think that's how it started because German bears a lot of resemblance and similarities to Sanskrit. And having studied Sanskrit in school, I was always, I gravitated kind of towards the language and I fell head over heels. So the journey just continued from my college days officially to Goethe Institute. We know it as Max Muller Bhavan in India widely. So I continued my language training from Max Muller Bhavan in Mumbai, parallel to my bachelor's in English literature. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. It was pretty visual in nature. It was predominantly visual, I would say. And yet I had classmates who described images to me and videos. So we have in foreign language training, as you know, it's pretty interactive and the learning mode is both verbal and written. So the written part, I had to rely on sighted assistants back then, but I did excel at the verbal skills, and that's how I also got my foundations of building interpersonal relationships. And yeah, had an amazing German teacher who inspired me and who created that accessible and inclusive space for me to learn the language.
This study of German master's level also happened in India?
Yes, indeed. I studied at University of Mumbai at the German department at Kalina campus.
And then you were also telling me that you had a JRF, a Junior Research Fellowship from the UGC University Grants Commission. So what that was also for some kind of research work in German studies?
So I completed my master's and I got a scholarship. I had participated in a German, it was a competition organized by the University of Tübingen, which is in South Germany near Stuttgart. It was an essay competition, which I won. I was the only Indian. And I went there for around a period of 6 months. That's a semester roughly. And that was again for like as a research scholar, and that was a turning point again because that is where I found my topic for my PhD research on non-visual aesthetics. Besides, that was my first experience internationally in Germany, in Europe, so to say, and it again taught me a lot about what I had only learned in theory. So the decision to dive deeper into German studies only strengthened manifold. So yeah, and I returned to India, and I applied for my PhD, and the JRF, the Junior Research Fellowship, I cleared my national eligibility test, the NET exam, and I received the JRF for my PhD research in that framework.
So your doctorate is from India or the doctorate is from Germany?
Yeah, so it's a collaborative effort. So my research was conducted at University of Göttingen in Germany, where I had my second supervisor guide. Whereas the degree that was conferred, that is in India from University of Mumbai, where I have my first guide, Professor Dr. Vibhas Rana.
So after you became Dr. Urvi Jangam, you were looking for a job. So what was the thinking at that point of time? What was the kind of jobs you were looking for, and where have you actually landed up after that?
After my PhD, since I started traveling internationally, and I was often asked, how does one perceive aesthetically without the visual sense? So I wanted to essentially apply that, bring the topic into applied practice from its theoretical area. And that is where the concept of Aesthesis Foundation for Visually Impaired, the idea was born. I co-founded the nonprofit organization, the Training Institute for blind and visually impaired learners here in India. It was during the pandemic. So yeah, I mean that's where I moved into the space of thought leadership and applied practice. So I introduced the first German as a foreign language course for adult learners with blindness and visual impairment.
So this non-visual aesthetics that you talked about, had you known about this area of work before you got into it?
Well, it started when, as I said, people started asking me, how do you perceive the world around you as a traveler specifically? So that evoked my interest, and I realized quickly that there were no scientific answers to this question. And what I was trying to convey was also being, people did not understand it completely. So I decided, why no research on this? And I again realized that um, within the philosophical aesthetics framework, we did not have any theoretical frameworks which did not cover this question. So I decided to, I thought it was time to come up with something new, and I decided to try what's again going intercultural, wherein I used German literature. So these were literary texts by German-speaking authors, which I analyzed and applied the Indian theory of rasa. While analyzing these texts, again, there were gaps because all of this remains really visual theoretically. Rasa, as we know, is taste, if one understands it. But again, it was completely visual in nature. So that is where I felt the need of coming up with something entirely new. And I decided to add on to the classical rasa theory, where I came up with the concept of Adrish Rasa or non-visual aesthetics.
If you know of anyone with vision impairment who needs guidance in living life with blindness, please share the Eyeway National Helpline number 8800004334. The number is 8800004334.
Very often, when we talk about our own homes, we hear comments like, "Oh, that is aesthetically designed drawing room or sitting room." So, if I were to ask you, what might be a non-visual, aesthetically designed drawing room? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very relevant and interesting question. Thank you for that one. So just imagine you're sitting in the room, you enter a house, and right from where you enter the door and get rid of your footwear, and you come in contact with the space, the flooring. So that is where your first tactile contact starts, right? And then you start listening, you start hearing your surroundings. So that is, I mean, and of course, it can be paired with, if you have some vision, of course, that can be used to understand and interpret your surroundings. So coupled or combined with the vision that you have, but primarily with the hearing space and the tactile experience, you start to generate your own picture in your mind. And depending on where you're sitting, so for example, if depending on the flooring, whether it's like kind of gives an earthen kind of feel, or whether it's smooth, or what you hear in the space and around you, what are the objects that you encounter, whether you bump into something first and discover the consecutive object, or you are guided by a sighted counterpart, which is mostly the case, and where you get seated. And so that's how what is described to you. You build your own picture, which might be partly tactile, auditory, and the combination of remaining senses which you use. So depending on what you interpret and what is described to you by your sighted counterpart, whether it's your family member or a stranger, or you have your own experience.
So tell us a little bit about your corporate job.
Yeah, so when I decided to again switch and enter the corporate space, it was a difficult journey because in India, as you know, it is still not believed that as a professional with visual impairment or blindness, you can perform at par. So it was horrendously discriminating. I was told on my face at times that we cannot hire you just because you're blind. And that has happened both virtually and offline, which was pretty disheartening. But then I finally got a job at Capgemini in Mumbai, Capgemini Technologies. That's where I work currently. And I do work I do work within the space of corporate training, apart from being a translator and an interpreter, where my language skills come into the picture again and very actively.
So at Capgemini, is there a need for a lot of translation work and interpretation work to happen to hire a full-time person?
Yes, indeed. Our translation team is pretty, fairly strong, and we do have clients from the German-speaking countries, which makes the need even more evident. And of course, the teams, onshore teams from these countries.
And what's the kind of training that you do? Is it again language linked, or it's other topics?
So I started out with language training. So if there are employees who are traveling to Germany, essentially leadership and higher management, people who have to travel, and I started out with designing trainings for them, which just to give them the basics of in terms of vocabulary and cultural norms, to navigate themselves, not just within the workspace, but also for their day-to-day interactions. Primarily, of course, it was workspace training. And then just the basic speaking skills for the offshore employees here to communicate with, the onshore teams and the clients. And then I moved on to verbal communication and more in terms of refining workspace dialogue and improving workspace communication. So I'm just now trying to enter the space of communication and psychological safety in terms of speaking. So I design trainings around speaking skills, not just as soft skills, but in terms of filling communication gaps and where silos can emerge, and where in terms of team building.
To support our work with the blind and visually impaired, you can visit the donate page on our website www.scorefoundation.org.in. Please note www.scorefoundation.org.in.
You say that you are a life coach. Can you tell me who is a life coach, and how did you actually qualify to be a life coach?
Just imagine that you were, sitting in a carriage and there is like that's the coach which carries you from point A to B, right? And
Yeah.
there's a driver who drives it. So in that same way, life coaching is a process where you are at point A and you want to get to point B. And the only difference being you can do it just in within your space where you talk to a coach who helps you reflect on your thoughts and your ideas. So it's all your space and I as a coach would just come up with maybe some questions and reflecting your own thoughts back at you. Um, and where you have the range, it's all yours. It's your decision, your thoughts, your life. So
Yes.
you are the master, you're the expert. I am just the person who is helping you steer your thought through your thoughts and through you know in your desired direction. So it's like being that catalyst, creating the space for change and for reflection in a nutshell.
Urvi, who are the kind of people you generally work with when you're talking about life coaching?
The people from all different spaces, so essentially corporate employees, but I also work with homemakers and students who are trying to find, their career choices or the next steps that they want to take in their career. Because I am trying to work in the space of transitions. So I come across people from all the sections of the society and all age groups, not children, of course, because I work with adults. I'm not specialized in child coaching.
And your qualifications is essentially in psychology.
Yes, I am an emerging coach. So there's this body called International Coaching Federation, where one can get certified and trained um, as a coach. So that is the process that I'm currently. It's an ongoing process, and I also aspire to enter the field of psychology, which is again in the making.
I also understand that you are an animal lover and you spend a lot of time with your pets.
Oh, I've always been drawn to animals. I have wanted my own dog since I was 3, since I can remember. So, I've had all sorts of pets, ranging from lovebirds. Oh, my father gifted me a pair of lovebirds just to make me understand the concept of words. And I still remember when I just caught it as a child and it bit me hard on my finger. And yet I was not repelled. So I learned how to go about gently, and I made friends with those birds. And it started from there. And I had pets ranging from parrots to a rabbit to a hamster. Oh, I had my hamsters in Germany where I lived alone and completely independently. And I love spending time with my cat, who is currently actually dozing behind me in my chair whilst I have our conversation here. So, pets have remained an integral part of my life. And Germany was a paradise because I could meet old pets. And I volunteered for a cat shelter there, where I used to go on almost day-to-day basis. And that's where I met my first blind cat, and that was again a great learning experience.
I've noticed that in the Western world, cities like London and uh, say New York and so on, you have a fair bit of public transport. But there are many places in the Western world where public transport is very basic. People have their own vehicles. In fact, it seems to an outsider that it is quite to live a normal life, you need a vehicle. So, as a blind and visually impaired person, say in living in Germany, what was your experience? Did you feel the absence of public transport as a handicap?
No, on the contrary, I mean, the public transport system in Germany is really strong, and that's what helped me. It enhanced my mobility because I used to travel only via public transport, whether it's buses or trains. So it really enhanced my mobility in terms of moving on my own. It was rarely only from, when I had heavy luggage with me while coming back from India. Or like during nights, I used to take taxi, but otherwise it was always the buses and trains. And that really makes you independent because you don't have to rely on sighted counterparts. And of course, in buses, etc., every bus stop is announced. And even the personnel, like the bus drivers, are trained. So if there is an obstacle and you're trying to, board the bus, they'll tell you that there's careful, there's an obstacle in front of you.
So tell me a little bit about your family and how did you actually lose your sight?
Well, so I lost my sight almost immediately after birth. I was born with ROP, retinopathy of prematurity. And I lost my sight during the incubation period, and my parents tried things within and beyond their reach. So I was operated thrice. My parents left no stone unturned, and till they discovered that there was no treatment possible, which was like during first 2 years of my life where I was in the US on and off. And then they decided to school me, however, in a regular school because they did not want me to be cut off from the mainstream. And that is how my journey started. And my parents remain my, they sculpted my life. I owe it to them because that instinct that sky is the limit for you. Every road is open. You can explore and experiment with whatever you want. So whether it was my educational or personal space, I was brought up with this attitude. I was raised with this approach. It was my father who had, I still remember the conversation that we had on the bus. I was a 10-year-old. He told me, you just aim for a PhD, no matter which field you choose in life as an adult, and you want to reach those kind of heights. My mom, has been my constant support. She, has taught me patience and endurance. So, and there's this whole aesthetic perception. I think it comes from my parents and my sister, I have a younger sister who is currently studying in the US for her master's. So, my family really plays a vital role in my upbringing and the individual that you currently see today.
What is your vision for tomorrow?
I actually envision myself stepping into an interdisciplinary career. So, now that I have the kind of language expertise and my research on non-visual aesthetics, I actually imagine myself working in the field of psychology and researching in the field of psychology, of course, becoming a life coach where I can apply the concept of non-visual aesthetics, but in a very different way, not in terms of literature or architecture, but more in terms of human functioning and in terms of meaning making and identity. So I'm pretty it's a space which remains unexplored, and I'm actually keen to undertake this journey. So I see myself at a cross-disciplinary juncture at the intersection of aesthetics and coaching and psychology. And of course, I also see myself in the space of social work, because that journey was interrupted for me. I just wanted to widen my own horizons before I can again step into the mode where I want to give it back to the society.
Urvi, it's been wonderful speaking with you, and wish you the very best. And great, take care.
Thank you, George. Thank you for having me, and have a great day.
Eyeway, ये है रोशनी का कारवां.
This podcast was brought to you by Score Foundation.
रोशनी का